Welcome back. It's AVID Chat with David and Jack. We're switching up the intro this week. I need to get some practice doing an intro in case Dave isn't here. So it's my turn. So again, I'm here with Dave. How's it going, Dave?
Good, man. At Avid headquarters today. It's pretty cool to be up here. Sunny day, and excited to be here.
Yeah, the view looks great.
Yeah, it is. It's fantastic. We're just looking at, they're doing some more building down here, which is amazing. It's always changing. So
yeah.
So what's on the chat for today?
Well, I wanted to do something on kind of inner scorecard versus outer scorecard. You can kind of think of this as it's kind of an intrinsic reward versus an extrinsic reward type framework where, inner scorecard being the things that are, how are you following the things that are important to you versus an external scorecard being, what do other people find valuable and focusing on those things. So I just had some thoughts about that and some experiences talking to some people and just wanted to kind of expand on that a little bit.
So where did this come from? Because I know you read a lot of books. So is this something you've recently been reading, or?
I wouldn't say it's not. No. Well, I mean, this definitely something that I've, read through a lot. I think the internal scorecard thing is, Warren Buffett thing. He talks about that a whole lot, is kind of following your inner scorecard. I think some of it is it's experience talking with people and having done some planning stuff and having done it for a while, just kind of, it's a constant theme. It's also just a personal experience thing. Some of the, some of the hurdles and hangups and things that come up with really trying to follow an inner scorecard and how difficult it can be, especially to do it for the long run. I think it probably gets easier over time, the longer that you're doing it. But if you do come up, so I think let's say that you go through some kind of goal setting process, or you go through some kind of value discovery process where you're going to say, I think if you walked up to the average person on the street or anybody and you said, well, what are your values and what are the things that are important to you? I think you'd have a tough time getting an answer out of people, or at least any kind of articulate answer where they would say, well, here's the things. I just don't think we spend a lot of time thinking about it. I think most of the time we decide on the things that are important and the things that are valuable by what other people are doing, or it's, your parents will tell you, or, your friends, or just kind of society or culture at large. Well, there's things that we pick on that we think other people find valuable, and therefore we should find them valuable as well. And a lot of times most of the time, obviously, it's not just true. We all have a little bit different makeup. So
the scorecard is it's not like a checks and balances, but it's more being, if I'm hearing you correctly, being true to what's at the core of who you are, what drives you, what do you want to accomplish in life. And it doesn't have to be just financially. This could be
correct.
Personally in a relationship. This could be spiritual. I think all of those things would fit into this goal. But getting to that point and saying, okay, this really is what drives me or drives us if you're in a relationship. And then using that to start to have some sort of actionable items to go on that path. What I'm hearing you saying is the first part of it, which is just sitting down and getting to that point, is extremely difficult for a lot of us. And I think some of that's just taking the time, and then also, like, where do you start, right? Because it's kind of like you're all over. Normally we have a lot of thoughts in our head, and if Melissa and I, my wife and I, are just talking, we're just kind of back and forth, but there's not like a guided way to hone that into what I would say is a path or a value.
Right. It's hard to figure that out in the first place. There's no doubt. It's harder to do it. It was harder to do it on your own. It's probably more difficult to do it if you're doing it with, a spouse or something, just because you both have different. You obviously come up different ways. You have different personalities. You probably have slightly different values, and you probably consider certain things important or not important. There's no real right or wrong, but there's certainly going to be a difference. And that's hard to manage too. So, because sometimes those things are going to be a conflict with each other. And so, like anything to what do with having a spouse or another person is, some you're going to have to give and they're going to have to give. I think that's even more difficult. So doing it on your own or with a spouse is difficult. We always kind of advocate using a third party, and it doesn't have to be a professional. I suppose it would help, but it could be even just a impartial kind of straight shooter type friend. They can help you work through it. And you probably help each other. If you had a good friend that you kind of have an open relationship like that with, where you can talk about these things, you could probably help each other out and say, what are your values and what are my values, and really kind of work through it. That part's
Yeah.
as hard as it anyways. I think the more difficult thing to do is to live by that, is to decide these are my values and here's the things that are important to me, and stick with it, and stick with it over the long run, because naturally it's going to be slightly different from other people. It doesn't have to be opposite. Like, it doesn't have to be kind of investment parlance. It doesn't have to be negatively correlated with everybody else. You don't have to say, if somebody says I like pizza, you say it's the worst ever, I just can't stand it. You just have to like slightly different things or be uncorrelated. Like, it's just not exactly the same as anybody else. But it's going to be tough because you're going to see, at least perceive, how other people are doing things. And you'll start to question that, well, maybe my value should be different. Or maybe what I find is important to me is, like, quote unquote wrong if compared to what other people are doing. And that is like a constant struggle.
So do you think
That's
this is like a couple of examples, and tell me if these are in line with what you're thinking or not? Like um, I have a family, therefore I need two cars. I graduate and I shouldn't rent, therefore I should buy. I'm married, and now that I'm married, probably should start having kids. So that would be I guess, societal norms, or maybe some of the pressures that are in there. But at the core, if I had children, but if I didn't really want children and I wasn't comfortable owning that fact, and I just went ahead and went into it, man, what a nightmare that would probably create.
Yeah, that would be a good one. Yes. Some of those things are more actions, like doing this. How does it relate to my values, type of thing? So it's like, how do the actions that I'm taking relate to my values? So you could have a value where it's, I really value my family and I want to spend time with my family, and I don't want to sacrifice that. The opposite. So let's say that was important to you. Maybe you put that number one. That's really important to me. But then you have a job which requires constant travel and you're gone 4 days at a time, but it pays well. So,
Right.
then there's a little bit of conflict between those two things. And if you said, oh, I'm a traveling salesperson, let's say, and I go around the country and do whatever, and I make, 200 grand a year, $250,000 a year, man, it's tough to say, well, I'm going to do this other job, which will give me a lot more time with my family, but it makes half as much. Like, that's a real choice that I think sometimes you have to make. And that's where you would feel a lot of pressure, probably from yourself, but also societally, to feel like, at least I'm going to tell you just as a male, is it seems like from birth, your whole purpose in life is as much money as you can possibly make. Damn everything else. That's the goal. That's kind of what I know, I'm sure that this is no different than most males, is that's the kind of the image that you get, is that's,
Yeah, I got to make more money, and more money will get me more stuff, and therefore the more stuff is what I'm going to help drive life.
Right.
And then you get older and you're like, yeah, I don't know. And I think that doesn't matter how you're raised. I think, like you said, society is around there. I mean, I have a pretty big, I guess, biblical background, you would say, that, would kind of teach against the materialistic things, but it still is a part of who we are.
Yeah.
And, going through periods of life and making money and not making money and doing whatever. Yeah, there's a constant, I think.
Now, it could be the other thing too. I mean, you could do the opposite. You could be a person that says, I really value making lots of money, and that's what's number one for me. I mean, fine. If that's what you've decided is your number one value, I think that's fine. I'm not one to judge what you value and what you don't value. I think it's more the deciding on what your values are and then sticking with it is usually ends up being the tough part, because you're going to come into situations where you're going to have to pick between, your values and things that are important to you, and something else. The easy thing is to save money, but that's not always it. There's lots of things. It could be any number of kind of things that will help, force you to kind of somewhat pick,
Yeah.
between the two things. One thing actually I think would be good to read is, um, there's an essay by a guy named Clay Christensen he wrote a book called Innovator's Dilemma. It talks about like tech disruption and disrupting companies, which he was like he was a Harvard or maybe a Stanford professor, I'm not sure. But he wrote an essay called, I think it's called How Will You Value Your Life, or How Will You Measure Your Life is what it's called. And that's a really good read. He actually passed away not too long ago, and it's a really good read. And he has some examples in there of, he was a basketball player, and he was a pretty religious person, and he said that he wouldn't play on Sundays, and that was kind of just like he told himself when he was very young he wouldn't do that. And he played on a basketball team in college, and they had a big game coming up, and it was on a Sunday, and he wouldn't play. And how difficult of a decision that was, but that he made a commitment to himself that that was something that was valuable to him, and he had to somewhat pick between the two. So it's really good. I would say that's a good essay to read that kind of touches on the subject. But I think just in a general sense is, we do this with people all the time, is going through a kind of values discovery or goal setting process, whatever it is, to work through to decide this is what's valuable to me. And this is what's important to me. And I want to organize my financial life in a way that supports those things. And we can do that. There's always comes a time where it starts to get questioned. Something will come up. Well, I want to do this. And it's like, well, okay, but if you do this, then you're kind of backing off a little bit on this other thing. And there's just a struggle. And that's probably the tough thing. Like I was saying before we started recording, is kind of the straight path in your head, turns into spaghetti in the real world. This is where I want to go. What you'll find is you'll go this way and you'll be focused on your values, and you'll start to get off track sometimes. But if you stay on track, you'll seem to the outside world that you're just all over the place, because you're always seeing what works and kind of always coming back to your values, and it seems like you're jumping around, versus what would seem to the outside world as a very straight line in the real world. Like I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this, which I guess you kind of see as a kind of standard life script. But in your mind, what you start doing is it's spaghetti in your mind, because you're just always justifying to yourself why you're doing something, because you'll say, well, this isn't really to my values, but this. And you start to make considerations to continue to live what would normally be kind of a straight line in the real world. So like a person that, like the money thing, well, I'm making so much money, I'll only do this for X. I'll do it for 5 years or something. I'll do it for 10 years. I'll save a bunch of money. And then I'll live to my values and the things that are important to me. And then 10 years comes, and you've built up a whole identity around having X amount of money. It's tough to go back. So
yeah. Well, I'm going to play a little opposition here, because earlier you made a comment, and I've kind of been thinking about, and definitely through this last example that you've been giving, is you made a comment about talking to a friend. Just, it doesn't have to be a professional. Just talk to an unbiased friend that's willing to listen and ask questions. And I would agree. I think that's a great place to start. But I would say, and this is biased, definitely because of what we do for a profession and the true health process that we use. But I do think that there's an advantage to having a professional, not necessarily an AVID, but this is almost like people go to therapists. I've gone to therapists before, right? To talk through things. And I think the professional part is important, is because there normally is some sort of process that gets you to either realization and or some sort of action to help you implement those things. I think as a friend, it can be more difficult to listen to you, ask some question maybe to help continue your brain thought, but then also lend you into some strategic path of change or adjustment. So I would say that, again, I'm biased here, but a professional at some point could definitely help. And that the second part to a professional, and if there's an ongoing relationship, is it's revisited, right? The values are revisited.
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend yesterday about doing vision boards, which is kind of what's out there and what am I interested in? And these are things I want to accomplish in this year and I want to focus it. And it's not going to be easy to do every day. But if I go back to my vision board and say, oh yeah, that's right. And if I have a professional or a third party that says, all right, this is what you talked about. This is what you said important. Are these things in line? We're not here to judge, like you said, but we're here to encourage and remind you that these are values that you've set, which values can change. But a long-winded way of me saying, I think there's value at some point to using a professional to really help, I guess, if we're motivating change or we're making a difference or really get into the core value so that 10 years doesn't go by and you say, wish I would have.
Yeah. I 100% agree. I think it's the same type of thing where it's like getting a personal trainer. Like, how do you think you would push yourself more if you were doing it on your own, or if you had a trainer / coach to help you along and guide you and kind of push you beyond where maybe you think you can go? There's no doubt that having a professional help. I mean, this is just true across the board. Any professional athlete that you see that is a high performer has a coach. Like, they have somebody that's helping them and pushing them along. It's not as if these people don't know how to play basketball, let's say. They know what they're doing. They just need an outside person to tell them. So I'm 100% with you on the needing a professional. The reason I say a friend is because, I guess getting an athletic coach is a little bit more, I don't know, maybe acceptable. I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just my personal biases. I think people have hesitation for going and talking about their values with a professional. It's like there's something broken. There's nothing broken at all. It's just that, if anything, that's a high performer's habit, is to seek out third-party advice on how to get better. And it's not a broken thing. You're not a broken person because you're going and trying to get help to figure these things out. I think that's the step in the right direction instead of a step back. So, but if you're the kind of person that says, I don't need professional help on whatever, then fine. We'll work it out with a friend. But somehow figuring it out is valuable. If you just are completely allergic to getting a professional, fine, do it with a friend. But I agree with you. A professional would certainly do a better job, and they're going to be way better at prescription. Do this, and how about this, and what do you think about this type thing?
Yeah.
So
it's interesting that you make the elite reference. I think it's easy to pick on an athlete, but whether you like him or not, Tiger Woods had as a swing coach, always had.
Yep.
Revisited, rechanged, redesigned, constantly trying to get better. And that, talk about some natural talent from a normal person. So I think that ties into the example as it's not a hindrance. It's not going to therapy, going to talk to somebody. And we've had people say this, oh yeah, probably going to laugh. Went to the therapy. I'm like, no, congrats. That's a great step to humility and being open. It's maybe I just need to get a bunch of this stuff out and someone else can help listen. And I think great therapists are great listeners. And at the end of the day, navigate us to make the decisions that we already have. It's just hard to get to it because there's so much around us going on. It's hard to take the time. It's hard to, stay on a topic for so long. And so I guess that's maybe a little encouragement. If you're thinking about talking to somebody out there, do it. Like, you just don't hesitate, do it. Worst case scenario, you spend $50, $100, I don't know what it costs. Maybe a little bit more depending on what you're after. But you come up with some resolution. And maybe the resolution is, I'm good. I don't need it anymore.
I think the summary would be figuring out your inner scorecard is hard enough as it is. Sticking with it and doing it for the long run is 10 times more difficult. But it is hard. So there's no, it's not if you find yourself trying to do that and you find yourself having a difficult time, that's a totally normal thing. As a matter of fact, if it's hard, you're probably moving in the right direction, because it's going to be difficult to move on your own direction if that's what you're trying to accomplish. So following your inner scorecard is easy in theory, difficult in practice. It's a totally normal thing. If you find yourself having a difficult time deciding what an inner scorecard is and what are the things that are valuable to you, get some help. Talk to a person. If you need a advisor of some sort, or coach, whatever you want to call it, to make yourself feel better about doing it, great. If you just do not have no interest in doing that whatsoever, talk to a friend. I'm sure you have a friend or somebody you could talk to that would, you'd probably help with each other benefit. It'd be beneficial to both of you to work through and figure these things out on your own. So I think that's maybe a good summary.
I think it's fantastic. Good subject, good chat. Great to see you.
Yep, I did. See ya.